I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Queen Elizabeth's connection to a blood cult might sound like a wild rumor, but the evidence I uncovered is far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. Each piece of my 30-day investigation uncovered chilling details that made me question everything about history and power. What if everything we thought we knew about the crown was a lie? Let us dive into this shocking tale and uncover the truth that will bring the British monarchy to its end. Shadows lurking in the royal halls. For 22 years, I served as a royal guard at Buckingham Palace. At first, the honor of being stationed there felt like the pinnacle of achievement. My training had been intense, but stepping into the palace felt like stepping into history itself. The royal family was treated as if they were untouchable, almost divine. Yet as the months turned into years, I began to see cracks in this perfect image. Shadows seemed to lurk where none should be, and sounds echoed in the stillness of the night, hinting at a world far removed from the fairy tale most people imagine. Before we go further, it's clear that what I witnessed behind those palace walls is far darker than anyone could ever believe, and this is just the beginning of the revelations. The first unsettling incident happened just months into my assignment. While on patrol late one night, I noticed strange shadows moving in an empty hallway. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but the eerie sensation of being watched was undeniable. When I mentioned this to a senior guard, he simply muttered, "Keep your head down and do your job." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. It wasn't just a warning, it felt like a command to bury my curiosity. Over time, the whispers among the guards hinted at forbidden areas within the palace. Certain corridors were off limits, even to us. The doors to these areas were heavy, reinforced, and seemed to exude an air of menace. Despite strict orders to avoid these places, my curiosity grew. What could be so confidential that even those tasked with protecting the palace were kept in the dark? One night during a routine patrol, I noticed one of these forbidden doors slightly ajar. A faint light spilled out and an unnatural metallic smell wafted through the air. My instincts screamed at me to walk away, but I couldn't resist. As I approached, the air felt heavier, almost suffocating. Just as I was about to step inside, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. It was Thomas, one of the most senior guards. "You have no idea what you're doing. Walk away," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but filled with urgency. His eyes held a mixture of pity and fear, and he added, "The Queen knows everything, and she forgives nothing." Those words stayed with me, raising more questions than answers. What could possibly warrant such secrecy and fear? As the years went by, I began to piece together fragments of information. Guards who ventured too close to the forbidden zones either left their posts abruptly or seemed to change overnight. They became distant, their eyes hollow as if burdened by something too heavy to bear. I couldn't shake the feeling that the palace wasn't just a residence, it was a fortress guarding something ancient and powerful. The more I observed, the clearer it became that Queen Elizabeth was not just the public figure the world adored. Behind closed doors, her presence carried an almost otherworldly weight. She was revered, yes, but there was an undercurrent of fear among those who served her closely. Her connection to the forbidden areas of the palace was undeniable. Every mention of those zones was accompanied by a hushed tone, as if speaking too loudly could summon something terrible. The turning point came during one of my final years at the palace. While patrolling late at night, I heard faint murmurs coming from one of the restricted areas. It wasn't just the sound itself that was unsettling, it was the tone. The voices were low and rhythmic, almost like a chant. Against my better judgment, I approached the door. The metallic smell was stronger this time, and the air felt electric, like a storm was brewing just beyond the threshold. Before I could get too close, Thomas appeared again, his face pale and strained. "Do you want to end up like the others?" he asked, his voice trembling. He didn't need to explain who the others were. Over the years, I had seen too many guards disappear without explanation or return as mere shadows of their former selves. Thomas's warning was enough to pull me back, but my curiosity had already taken root. One of the most chilling moments came when I stumbled upon an old ledger tucked away in an abandoned office. The entries were cryptic, but certain phrases stood out: sacrifice, blood rights, and preservation of power. The dates spanned decades, suggesting that whatever was happening had been going on for a long time. My hands shook as I read, the weight of what I was uncovering pressing down on me. The whispers and locked doors around the palace hinted at something much bigger, and I was about to get too close to it. Whispers of darkness in the palace. I began to notice patterns in the palace's activities. Late-night gatherings in the forbidden zones coincided with significant events or announcements involving the monarchy. The connection was too strong to ignore. It became clear to me that the palace wasn't just a place of tradition and governance, it was a hub for something far more sinister. The final straw came during a rare moment of solitude in the palace's gardens. I overheard two staff members speaking in hushed tones about the ritual and ensuring continuity. Their conversation was brief, but the gravity of their words was unmistakable. I realized then that whatever was happening wasn't just confined to the palace walls, it had far-reaching implications for the world beyond. As I write this, I'm still grappling with the enormity of what I witnessed. The palace's grandeur is a mask, hiding layers of darkness that most people could never imagine. The truth is that Buckingham Palace isn't just the heart of the monarchy, it's the epicenter of something far more disturbing. The power it represents isn't just political or symbolic, it's something ancient, something that demands secrecy at all costs. Looking back, I understand why so many chose silence over curiosity. The burden of knowing is immense, and the risks of speaking out are real. But the world deserves to know that the monarchy's power is not what it seems. There is a cost to maintaining the illusion of stability and tradition, and that cost is far darker than anyone could imagine. Have you ever stopped to think about what might be hiding right in front of us? The things we're told to accept, the institutions we trust, and the power structures that shape our lives. What if it's all just a part of something much larger? One night, my perspective was shattered, and I could no longer see the world the same way. It was a quiet night, too quiet, and the events that followed made me question everything I thought I knew about authority, control, and the unseen forces pulling the strings. This is not just a story, it's a glimpse into a reality that many choose to ignore. That night, while on patrol at Buckingham Palace, the air felt heavier than usual, as if the very walls carried a weight of their own. The silence was oppressive, and every step I took seemed louder than it should have been. It was then that I came across a door, not just any door, but one that stood out. Reinforced with heavy metal bars and exuding an aura of secrecy, it seemed almost alive in its presence. Against every protocol and instinct, I approached it. My hand trembled as I reached out, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. Peering through the narrow opening, I saw something that defied explanation. Men in dark uniforms moved with unnatural precision, their synchronized actions almost robotic. In the center of the room stood a metallic structure that resembled a cage. Inside it sat a figure that made my blood run cold. Its skin was scaly and reflective, catching the dim light in a way that seemed almost hypnotic. Its glowing yellow eyes locked onto mine, piercing through the bars and into my very being. I was frozen in place, unable to move, unable to think, as if its gaze had rooted me to the spot. Before I could process what I was witnessing, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. Spinning around, I saw Thomas, a senior guard known for his stoic demeanor. But that night, his face was pale, his eyes filled with terror. "You've seen too much," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Leave, now. Forget what you've seen or it will destroy you." His urgency left no room for argument. He practically dragged me away, but not before I caught one last look at the creature. Its head tilted slightly, almost as if acknowledging my presence, as if it knew me. The walk back through the palace's corridors felt surreal. Thomas spoke in hushed tones, his words cryptic but loaded with a sense of finality. "The Queen, she's not what she seems," he muttered. "Her confidentials are beyond comprehension. They've been guarded for centuries, and no one who digs too deep comes out unscathed." I wanted to ask more, to understand what I had stumbled upon, but the look in his eyes silenced me. It was the look of a man who had seen too much and knew better than to speak of it. In the days that followed, the memory of that night haunted me. The palace, once a symbol of tradition and stability, now felt like a labyrinth of hidden truths. Every corridor seemed to pulse with an unspoken tension, as if the building itself was alive, watching, waiting. I began to notice things I hadn't before: whispers in the shadows, fleeting figures in the corner of my eye, and doors that seemed to open and close of their own accord. It was as if the palace was trying to reveal something to me, or perhaps warning me to stay away. Every step deeper into the palace showed me things I couldn't ignore, but what came next was far worse. Descending into the unknown. One evening, while patrolling near the royal apartments, I came across another anomaly. A door, slightly ajar with a faint light flickering from within. This was not just any door. It led to what the veterans called the tunnels of silence. The very mention of these tunnels was enough to make even the bravest guards uneasy. They were spoken of in hushed tones, their purpose shrouded in secrecy. My rational mind told me to report it and move on, but something deeper pulled me in. I pushed the door open and descended a spiral staircase made of ancient stone. The air grew colder with each step, and the flickering light cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. At the bottom, I found a long hallway lined with metal doors, each marked with strange symbols that I couldn't understand. One door stood open, a pulsating blue light spilling out into the corridor. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. What I saw defied belief. The room was filled with equipment that seemed far too advanced for anything I had ever seen. And there, in the center of it all, stood Queen Elizabeth II. But she was not the public figure the world adored. Her demeanor was cold, calculated, and her eyes held an unnatural intensity. She moved with a purpose that seemed almost otherworldly, her every action deliberate and precise. I watched in stunned silence as she interacted with the same metallic structure I had seen before, her hands manipulating controls with a skill that suggested years of practice. At the heart of the room was another figure, encased in what looked like a glass cylinder filled with a strange glowing liquid. The being inside was unlike anything I had ever imagined. Its features were humanoid but distinctly alien, its body emitting a faint rhythmic glow. It appeared to be in some kind of stasis, its chest rising and falling in a slow mechanical rhythm. The Queen glanced at it briefly before turning her attention back to the controls, her expression unreadable. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. I turned to see Thomas standing in the doorway, his face a mix of anger and fear. "You were told to stay away," he hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the room, slamming the door shut behind us. "This is beyond anything you can comprehend," he said, his voice low but urgent. "If you value your life, you will forget what you saw and never speak of it again." That night, I couldn't sleep. The images replayed in my mind over and over, each detail seared into my memory. The Queen's cold gaze, the alien figure in the glass cylinder, and the unexplainable technology that filled the room. I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't understand, a game that was being played on a scale far beyond my comprehension. The palace, once a place of honor and tradition, now felt like a fortress of hidden agendas and unfathomable power. In the weeks that followed, I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened, but the weight of what I had seen was impossible to ignore. I began to notice subtle changes around the palace. Guards who had been there for years suddenly disappeared without explanation. New faces appeared, their expressions blank and their movements almost mechanical. The atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with an unspoken tension. I knew I had stumbled upon something far bigger than myself, something that could change the way we see the world. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that knowing the truth came at a price. The palace was not just a symbol of power and tradition, it was a hub of things that spanned generations, and I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards feels like a reminder of that night. The truth, as terrifying as it is, has a way of revealing itself in the most unexpected ways. And once you see it, there's no going back. The world seemed to stand still as I stared into the mirror, transfixed by what it reflected. The figure before me appeared poised and perfect, but the glass revealed a different story. Its surface betrayed an image of something not entirely human. The reflection showed a tall, imposing form, covered in shimmering scales, and its piercing yellow eyes radiated a fierce, predatory energy. I couldn't move, trapped in place by the terrifying realization that something far beyond my understanding was happening right before me. I thought I had seen everything, but what I was about to find would change everything I believed. The creature behind the mask. The figure slowly raised its hands and began peeling away its own skin. The movement was calm, deliberate, almost like a ritual. Beneath the human facade, its true form emerged. A reptilian creature with a long, angular jaw and sharp teeth that glinted in the faint blue light. It was as though the mirror had unlocked a reality hidden from the world, a truth concealed behind an elegant mask. The creature's yellow eyes locked onto mine, and a chilling wave of recognition passed between us. My heart raced, every beat louder than the last. The creature's gaze seemed to cut through me as it methodically replaced its human skin piece by piece. Once it was finished, it adjusted its posture, restoring the pristine appearance that could easily deceive anyone. Without a word, it turned and exited through another door, leaving me alone in the room. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my shaky breathing. My legs felt weak as I stumbled down the dim hallway, every shadow suddenly alive with sinister possibilities. When I finally emerged back to the surface, Thomas was there waiting. His face bore the grim expression of someone who had seen too much, someone who carried the weight of unspeakable knowledge. "You've made a terrible mistake," he said in a voice so low it was almost a growl. His words chilled me to my core. Though I didn't fully understand what he meant, I felt the gravity of it. I had crossed a line and there was no going back. From that moment, Buckingham Palace became more than a workplace. It transformed into a living, breathing question. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light seemed to hold a dark news. Late one night, while on patrol in the lower corridors, the silence felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, as if the air itself carried a warning. My footsteps echoed eerily, and a faint metallic smell lingered in the air, sharp and unsettling. As I moved deeper into the corridors, an unusual sound caught my attention. It started as faint rhythmic knocks, followed by whispers that seemed to grow louder as I approached. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but the whispers grew clearer, forming words in a language I couldn't recognize. The sounds pulled me toward an imposing metal door at the end of the hallway. It was unlike the others, larger and adorned with an intricate symbol that seemed to pulsate faintly under the dim light. The door was unlocked. Summoning every ounce of courage, I pushed it open. The sight on the other side was unlike anything I had ever seen. The room was massive, illuminated by an otherworldly blue light that seemed to have no discernible source. In the center stood a black stone altar etched with glowing carvings that seemed alive. Hooded figures knelt around it, their bodies swaying as they chanted in unison. Their voices vibrated through the air, resonating deep within me, making every hair on my body stand on end. Then she appeared. Queen Elizabeth entered the room, but she was unrecognizable. Her usual regal composure was replaced by an intense, almost otherworldly determination. In her hands, she carried a crystal object so radiant it seemed to hum with energy. The chanting ceased as she approached the altar. The silence that followed was suffocating, a thick, heavy void that pressed down on my chest. She placed the crystal on the altar and raised her arms as though commanding the room itself. The air vibrated violently, a low hum quickly escalating into an unbearable noise that made my ears feel like they would burst. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Something ancient and powerful was unfolding before me, and I was powerless to stop it. Before I could comprehend what was happening, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. I turned to see Thomas, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave. Now," he whispered, urgency dripping from every word. I didn't question him. He pulled me away, and I followed, stealing one last glance at the scene. The blue light had turned blood red, and the hooded figures appeared entranced, their movements unnatural and unsettling. We ran until the sounds of the ritual were nothing more than a haunting memory. When we finally stopped, Thomas's expression was one of pity and resignation. "Now you understand," he said, his voice heavy with despair. "They're not like us, they never were." His words hung in the air, cutting deeper than any weapon could. Everything I had seen, the reptilian figure, the ritual, the queen, confirmed a horrifying truth. Buckingham Palace was a facade, a grand illusion concealing something ancient and sinister. The weight of that realization settled over me, and I knew my life would never be the same. Could Queen Elizabeth's blood cult be a baseless rumor, or does it reveal something darker about the monarchy's power? Share your thoughts and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.